Good evening, everybody. System Chalk here with the 181st episode of our first YouTube run through the House of Light expansion to Book of Hours, playing as the Archaeologist. So we already have the pieces in place for the rest of the season and probably most of today's work. We've got Horns and Ivories, which is going to give me some scale to work with. That will be going into Hill and Hollow and Path and Pilgrim. From there, we have some surplus, so preliminary meter and stone stories. So what I think what I was originally planning on doing was pentiments and precursors and inks of power, but Pearl and Tide is actually the very last skill on my to-do list. So there was Pearl. I haven't erased this all yet, but there was Pearl and Tide, Insects and Nectars, Hill and Hollow, 2 points for Sand Stories. I hope I got that right. And 1 for Path and Pilgrim. I believe the destination for Sand Stories was supposed to be 5. So, right. All right. So never mind. We are not quite ready to... well, I mean, that's why we check this stuff, right? So I guess the easy answer then is to say that we'll take this Stone Stories point. We'll put that towards pentiments and precursors. And then preliminary meter will go into Sand Stories. However, Sand Stories should actually be a higher priority in terms of the memories that I'm generating. So, again, should have checked that ahead of time. Didn't, but it won't stop us from being able to achieve what we were looking for. So, what's the best way for me to... let's just shuffle this all over by 1. Technically, I don't need to do this anymore because, except for Pearl and Tide... all of these should be at the level they're supposed to be, but... Right. Sorry, that's not entirely true, because we still need to level up Path and Pilgrim and Hill and Hollow, but... Okay, so... a little bit of a weird one for me, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think this changes very much, because Sand Stories needs Moon and Rose. Path and Pilgrim needs Rose and Scale. Hill and Hollow needs Moon and Scale. We've got all the scale that I can generate, so what am I left generating? Well, Moon and Rose. So let's, again, we'll treat that, basically we'll treat this like I don't have... We'll treat this basically like I'm leveling all the same stuff. So, actually, this one I'm going to try and get a little clever on. So, metal here. Now, it actually would not hurt for me to bring in a secret threshold. Both of these are VAC books, but... Okay, now we're not going to need to worry about Whist, so... And again, it's Moon and Rose. So the easiest way for me to handle this here is just to read everything sort of in order. Did we... I can't recall if we did Devoured Tantra... I'll go from Devoured Tantra up. That's Confounding Parables. No Moon or Rose. Patterns doesn't give me what I need. No Regrets. Hindsight we already have. Fears we already have. We can get some Moon from Contradiction. I guess we already used up the core. Okay, Revelations doesn't do much for me. Solace, nope. Gossip technically gets me Rose. Again, I'm kind of doing all hands on deck as far as the memories are concerned, because this is why I saved the error, by the way. Even if the sand stories requirement didn't change, I still want I still have enough stuff with the moon and the rose divisions to make this worth maxing out. Okay. I think I've exhausted my options, so just as a reminder for myself, if my goal is Hill and Hollow, Path and Pilgrim, Pearl and Tide, Pentiments and Precursors. Okay, actually for Pentiments and Precursors, technically I could generate a couple of Grail memories. I normally wouldn't do this because I want to preserve the memories. But what I'll do here is I will read the skeleton songs, seeing as Denzel can't duplicate that one. Basically, I have one leftover desk. I might as well take advantage of it. And given that we have a minute with the sweet bones, what I'll do is I'll wait to see what I get from the desks. So the idea here is that with the exception of drinking some water and restoring the element of the soul that way, I'm not going to have to make any firm decisions in terms of how I handle these memories until slightly less than a minute from now. And basically from there, I'll set aside some memories for leveling. I'll set aside the memories to generate set aside some elements of the soul to level. Set aside elements of the soul to generate the memories that I need. And from there, I will decide if I need to go any further with generating memories from the sweet bones and such. Or, sorry, elements of the soul from the sweet bones and such. The only complaint I have here is that it would have been nice to have a bit of a longer sort of runway in terms of just getting things leveled constantly throughout the day, but we should still be able to make the most of the time. Speak to Denzel, he might even reply. So yeah, the real decision point's going to come in 10 seconds when we look at what we've got left for the day's work. The highest priorities absolutely are going to be Hill and Hollow and Path and Pilgrim, but if I've got some space to work with the remaining Sand Stories point, I'll take the opportunity if it comes up. So for now, we're just going to load all these up. So, on the matter and deeds of serpents, this was probably the prophecies of the Naga, rendered into English and illustrated by William Midnight in Paris in the 1880s, but it shows a number of divergences from that text. It's certainly quite recent by the standards of VAC texts. The serpent folk, called the Great Hooded Princes, came to know the order called the House of Leith, and warred across the miles with them. They made an alliance with the Mother of Ants, whose children they had been. The text describes how the Great Hooded Princes escaped, or will escape, from the Fifth History, where they had died, or were doomed to die. They engaged in a secret conquest of the land of the Great River, called India in some histories, and have ensured that all other conquests of that land are false conquests. So secret threshold is really here for the rose, but it does grant some knock as well if I ever need it. The Devoured Tantra, the diplomat priest Stanislav John Schaller, transcribed this from the library of a Red Long, but his manuscript remains in a private collection in Karasham. The Devoured Tantra warns of the uses and dangers of appetite, but devotes an entire passage to the star-limbed hunger-bringers, who it describes with obvious affection. 1,000,000 blazing fires in the belly engulf what has been swallowed by the multiform mouths. Honey, a comprehensive guide. Harvey Haddington, pilot, polymath, confectioner, writes with great enthusiasm about the marvelous work of the bee. Haddington insists that all the primary aspects, nectar, scale, heart, lantern, moth, grail, are possessed by bees and expressed in honey. Clearly, he points out, there are only 6 primary aspects, as a honeycomb has only 6 angles. Yugol ink is prepared with these techniques, but so is skinshuck mead, and only skinshuck requires honey. Just as any beverage or foodstuff can be improved with the addition of honey, so any garden is improved by the presence of bees, even those bloody blumberendi. Deaths and their evasions. Father Stanislav John Schaller writes of the means and limitation of passage between the orders of the mansus, no long names ours. Unusually, Father John has written this book in Fucine for, he says, a special secrecy. He speaks very cautiously of the exceptions that can sometimes be made to the edicts of Chancel and Calyptra, and hints at the means by which he successfully returned a lantern long to flesh. Schaller mentions most cautiously of all that he has been permitted to see a book that speaks more deeply on the matter, but that it was surrendered into the shadow of a covenant stone of the watchman's tree. It can be retrieved if the 99th wink is reserved under the edict's liminal. As I used to say in my youth, the day is done and so am I, but I've earned my pay. So in this case, I think it makes sense for me to recover the shaft. I think the one thing we can say with a degree of certainty is that we will need... If anything, we will need more elements of the soul than not. It is spring, and the landlady has served me a slice of her stargazy pie, with the pilchard heads poking cheekily through the hot crust. 3 flowers hath the tree. Ernestine Peterhans records her observations of the growths of the trees and flowers around the isle, and the omens and portents she attempts to draw from them, particularly the yew tree in Earl Brian's meadow, whose flowerings are sometimes eccentric. Ernestine observes that in years when the tree flowers black, troubling secrets arise. When it flowers red, war and fires follow, and that no de Wolf heir has ever been born in a year where it flowers white. Ernestine attempts to use the tree's growth to advantage in her business affairs, but it fails. She is evidently very concerned when Hendrik de Wolf's grandson Giles runs off with a pale trollop Haffren in a year when the tree flowers white. She begins to fear she has entirely misinterpreted all the relevant omens. She is deeply concerned for the continuation of the de Wolf line and prays for Giles' return. The Crossing to Noon, the mystic Garcia Sauri gives a picturesque account of the adventures of Franklin Bancroft, Prince of Wines, and Ava de Wolf, the Pale Lady, on their way to the hidden island of Noon. For a long time, the Blackbone pondered her next move, until the moon dared to peep from behind a cloud, and the prince completed the composition of his third sestina, but the lady met the blind gaze of its open pores, waiting for the tide. Garcia Sauri acknowledges in an epilogue that it is widely known that Ava in fact tragically drowned herself and her twin infant granddaughters, without ever making such a journey. But he adds contemptuously that it is also widely known that the city unbuilt will so remain, that only one history is ever written, and that Janus is a Mansus prank. The Tripled Heart, sacred poems composed in honor of the hours venerated by the Sisterhood of the Triple Knot. The Grail is celebrated for her colors, the Malachite for her sweetness, the Axe for her constancy. The Thunderskin, least of the hours of the knot, when he is even counted among their number at all, is celebrated with an unexpectedly poignant elegy. What lives departs, what is dead remains. And finally, the Skeleton Songs, poems of greedy delight composed by the possibly pseudonymous Arbella Dusk, the rumored heiress turned madam turned poetess. In Arbella's introduction, she explains that the book was to be illustrated, but that the Suppression Bureau would not permit it. She hints that the illustration still exists somewhere. The book is dedicated to Sir Parzival of the Red Cup. The 26 delightful fruits, the 7 chastisements, the 9 gardens, the 4 regrets. Alright. So the first thing I want to do before I go any further on this is I want to try and divide the lessons and the memories in a useful way. So what I mean by that, I'm going to use the fear. So the Fear Savage Hymn and Hindsight are priorities for me to work with, simply because 2 of the 3 are ones that can be sort of eliminated with Denzel drawing from the right collection. So I'm actually going to move this. Actually, tell you what, we'll move these ones down, and then we'll make some decisions. So yeah, here we go. So one of the challenges here, one of these is moon and the other is rose. So there's no serious argument for saying we have to get rid of the moon or we have to get rid of the rose first. I did write hill and hollow first, so I guess technically that pushes me more towards the moon. Oh, actually, I guess the secret threshold means I have more rose that I'm sitting on. Okay, I'll use that as an excuse. 4, 5. Okay, yeah, that is actually a pretty good excuse because then I just need to use 1. So if it's rose, then it's the confounding parable, which is fine. So we'll start with that. This would mean Path and Pilgrim goes up first. And for that, I mean, I technically have 2 health left. Right, so this is where I actually need to be a little more thoughtful in terms of how I handle all of this, because I suspect that rose is going to be required for sand stories. Not true, actually. I could get by with the moon, too. I get the impression I probably could have saved myself a lot of trouble here if I just bothered to write a +2 on the sand stories. Okay, so for a starter here, we'll go with the health. So this is Path and Pilgrim moving up, which is fine. Now, we've got 2 minutes left in the day. So what I want to work out here is, in fact, I'll scratch out Path and Pilgrim from the list as well. So one of the things I might want to do is just get my game plan in order for sand stories. Even if that potentially comes at the expense of Hill and Hollow, but I think we can get by with both. Because if I take a look, so Sand Stories just needs 4 memories here. So, I don't know, we'll say, for the sake of the argument, we'll use preliminal meter here. Does that make sense? Because it's going to do pentiments and precursors. Okay, so Sand Stories, Hill and Hollow, pentiments and precursors. Yes, okay. So 1, 2, 3. Technically here I could use the occult scrap to generate generate something for the preliminal meter. But why would I? Because I've already got an intuition here. Oh yeah, this is looking pretty good actually. Okay, so Sand Stories is spoken for. Which means I just need to generate my Hill and Hollow. So the good news there is I get 3 freebies. So again, I don't want to completely count this as a win yet, but so we're working on Hill and Hollow now. Aha! Here's the tricky part. I didn't leave myself something for the pentiments and precursors, which is fine because Hill and Hollow wants moon. So, Sand Stories, Hill and Hollow, pentiments and precursors. Pentiments and precursors has 1 element now. So, first thing I need to do is generate 6 memories for Hill and Hollow. We've got 2, 4, 7, 10, 11. And then we need to generate 1 more for pentiments and precursors. Yeah, no, then we're fine. Okay, cool. So let's focus on Hill and Hollow. Yeah, I'll go for... No, actually, we'll use Whist in this case. Okay, so this time I'm going to focus on the scale stuff first. I guess we're on to Introduction to the Histories again. Then we go for Fear. Why have I forgot my last scale? Am I going... nuts. Oh, Savage Gem, of course. Alright, probably shouldn't have taken me that much effort, but... Hill and Hollow... Sorry, I really need to double check that Hill and Hollow really is a 7. It is not. I actually have it exactly where I need it. But we've kind of committed. So... yeah, that sort of sucks, but I think we'll... yeah, we can manage. Clearly I didn't update my plans. Okay. So the best bet here, given that... oops. So I need the moon for Hill and Hollow, and I need the basically Grail for Pentiments and Precursors. So I can probably get by with Assault, Confounding Parable, and Contradiction. So then we've got our Beguiling Melody. We said we're not getting any more scale. And I don't think I have any clever ideas for getting... yeah, I don't think I can get Grail without duplication. And I genuinely do not remember where we were in terms of satisfaction, so I'm going to start with Orchid Transfigurations Volume 2 and leave it at that. So, all that said, this should cover us for all of our memories. Which leaves me with 4... freebies. I really wish I had a better idea about what to do with these remaining 4. I know I can do stuff like go to Crowcross Sands and all that. Maybe what I'll do here, I have enough time, even in the worst case scenario, if I go to Crowcross Sands when we get the bells and the birds, I still... I'll still be able to collect the items. So it's really just making something like Orpiment Exultant that I'm limited to. If I'd been thinking, the other thing I could have done would be I could have tried to work out a better cooking scheme. But I'll leave that aside. Okay. Sadly, I don't think I can do anything about that hindsight. Yeah, so I think with the whist, I can at least cook in the jail kitchen. The tryst and the metal, I kind of create a jam in the Hall of Voices. Jam is in blockage, not an actual jam. Okay. So, yeah, sand stories should be my next priority. So satisfying to have come so far. So again, we get hit with a bit of duplication here on the hindsight, but I'm not too sad about that. One of the things I will do before the end of the day is I did need to work out the content or the memory of Gospel of Zacchaeus. I was originally going to say too, maybe I can try and generate something to keep over night, but it's not like I it's not like I have a shortage of memories, so I'll just let that sort itself out. Yeah, so at this point I think it would be nice if I can get something cooked. I'll have time for 2, I think. But obviously the priority here is to make sure that I have the I have all the lessons squared away. An introduction to the histories. The 17th century mystic and antiquarian Claude Heursault describes divergent incidents in 5 major histories. The prologue warns at length of the iniquities of one Julian Cosley, a former colleague who Heursault now describes darkly as a worm of worms. It seems Cosley advised Heursault early in the writing of the book, but Heursault later became suspicious. Heursault identifies blood, silver, design, and the worms as the central axes of each of the histories, and claims that the so-called second history is the true one. The Sun's Lament, the first volume of the Meditations of Abbot Thomas of the Abbey of the Black Dove. The thorn-beaked crows took my eyes from me in justice for my crimes. But though I lost my sight, I found my light. Abbot Thomas speaks of the breaking of his oaths to his sword brother Trygive and to the Lord of Scars that he served before he came to the abbey. He writes of the power of oath bonds and considers the means and morality of their sundering. Singlefoot Songs. Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest and diplomat, writes of his time on the slopes of Huashan, near to the Grove of Green Immortals, but never too near. Schaller's relations with the grove are cautious. It's a library of the tree, but under the hand of the hour named Applebright. In time, however, Schaller comes to be more sympathetic to the Applebright, which he suggests causes harm only when so invited. The Singlefoots of the title are one-horned, one-footed hill things with sweet but powerful voices, powerful enough to open the mountain. The Singlefoots sometimes trample pilgrims, sometimes heal them, sometimes coerce them to enter the mountain and become Singlefoots. Schaller explains that when he found this last becoming too tempting, he decided to return to his homeland. The Book of Thrones, a legend of the Shadowless Empire transcribed by Alexander Peterhans from Annals in a secret shrine in Anatolia. In the first and greatest history, a subject of the Shadowless Empire of Persia travels to the west, to the kingdom of the Persids. There he becomes a protege to the tutelary Persid deity, the scarred man who lives in the dark. He returns after 7 years to put his skills at the service of the Shadowless Empire, becoming their golden general. After many years of peace, the heirs of the Persids move against the King of Kings in the Shadowless Empire. The Golden General will not take up arms against the blood of his mentor until the King of Kings whispers a great secret of betrayal in his ear. He breaks his sword, forswears his oath to both the Empire and the Scarred Man, and enters the temple behind the world, leaving his life behind. Better now. The Origins of Hours. The sage and ecstatic Soham, a frequent visitor to the manses, claimed to have discoursed with the beach crow in person. Soham had later insisted on a sky burial. Soham's writings veer from poetry to confession. He identifies from flesh, those who were mortal, from blood, those who arose from sacrifice, from light, entry from the glory, and from stone, those who arose before his knowledge. He insists that Moth was the first god who was blood, but later contradicts himself and claims it was the Red Grail. The Mansis was different before the first god came from light, but never a doubt it existed, even then. To a Pale Lady, a collection of Franklin Bancroft's letters to Ava DeWolf. There's a substantial body of erotic pleading and half-finished poetry, but also learned discursions on matters mythical and marine, as well as notes towards a comic opera on which Franklin and Ava were apparently collaborating. Do not return, O my light, to the sea. None of us can be what we were, that is history's curse. None of us know what we may be, that is history's gift. Your mothers, and the mothers of your mothers, are caught in eternity's jaws like a robe hem in a trap. It is the pearl that shines, but the tide that returns. The Orchid Transfigurations of Birth, the second volume of a compilation of quasi-Rosicrucian allegories supposedly by Robert Fludd. This is in the original Latin. Fludd, or pseudo-Fludd, suggests alignments between the alchemical tradition of Rubidoux and the older Grail traditions through the Pine Knight's quest for the Cinnabar Cup. Seek the cup in the birthing bed, the Pine Knight is told. The midwife at the birthing bed, to his amazement, is the Mountain Mother. In a fit of awe, he both gelds and flays himself. The vigilant storm bursts joyfully from the remains. Okay, so as before, we're going to divide the lessons. So horns and ivories should be reserved for Kaelin Hollow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Good to go there. And this should be with Moon. Okay, so we're good. So Stone Stories, Beguiling Melody, and Satisfaction will be used to level pentiments and precursors from 2 to 3. That'll take the health. So again, this is the 1 minute, sort of 1 minute warning. So here at the Sweet Bones, we'll take the Shapt and turn that into money. Now, I did have some plans for a salon, and I believe we had some intermediate items. Sorry, I just need to use the Face ID on my tablet. I believe we had some items already prepared. So, yeah, we've got the roast beef. We have a stuffed acrid marrow. Creamed sugar, which I believe was going to be turned into... I suspect... Yeah, I actually think we've got a couple things we can do. So, first things first, let's take that whist. So, a precursor to sticky toffee pudding with bread and to fudge without bread, both notorious as founding crimes of 20th century culinary debauchery. Make fudge, a dish with Grail. And then the dripping should be something that we can use to make game chips. We're going to do that with the Tryst in the Hall of Voices, but in order to do that, I'm actually going to need to get some potatoes. So the slight drawback here is that I no longer have an element of the soul to... Wait, is that true? I don't think that's true. So I think the idea... So it should be one of the... In 30 seconds, one of these will be used to make potatoes. That should be the... Well, actually, it could be any of these. Then one of these will use the potatoes and the dripping to make the game chips. And from there, one of these can be used to find the contents of the Gospel of Zacchaeus. But we are at the 33-minute mark, so I was kind of hoping to finish off for today, but I also know the episodes get a bit longer than planned. So I think what we'll do here, I'll let the clock run down on the remaining tasks. We will finish out spring reasonably early on in the next episode. Obviously, a lot of this rests on whether or not Numa happens, but to be fair, if it doesn't, then we're going to be sort of waiting at the start of the day anyway to see who the guest is for the event, and then we get our invitations off and host the salon. So we should be in pretty good shape. Although I do feel that we're due for a Numa. I kind of say this every season, but it's, you know, I do think we're at a point now where the last one is fairly distant in memory. So I think we should treat it like any given crossover will produce a Numa. Although the pressure on us isn't quite the same, just because basically the skills are where they need to be. The exception, of course, is Pearl and Tide, but one way or another, whether we do it through Numa or whether we do it through reading, it would be fair to say the next season that comes up is going to basically be dedicated to leveling up Numa. One exception to that will be if we get a book that gets me an earth sign, because obviously I've been wanting another source of scale and nectar for a while. But barring that, I think anything that gets me Moon and Rose gets priority, and then we will use sort of the remaining. We use the remaining books to. I mean, one will sort of follow them through interest, but two, we will. We'll just slowly bring up the floor of my skills when the time comes. I think we're also at a fair point. If I do wind up leveling up Pearl and Tide to that last level prior to Numa, I'm definitely not opposed to committing everything to the Tree of Wisdoms. And then what that means is we no longer have the ability to break up a skill towards higher levels, but given the fact that we already have a surplus of books and we're raising the floor for our skills anyway, I don't actually think that's a major hurdle, because in the end the Salons will be giving me my lessons anyway. But again, all of that can be stuff that we work out later. I'm certainly not. I don't have a shortfall of things that I can do. It's really just a question in terms of what events come up in terms of the game that will dictate sort of when I do some of these things. But all of that will be resolved in tomorrow's episode. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.